person starts now.
Good evening. I want to show you a little boy named Cooper Roberts. He is 8 years old. On Monday, he was at the parade in Highland Park, Illinois, with his mom, Keely, and his twin brother, Luke. His mom was shot in her leg and foot. Luke was hit by shrapnel. Both are thankfully out of the hospital. Cooper was shot in the chest. He has already he's already gone through several rounds of surgery, and tonight his family says he is now paralyzed from the waist down. An 8-year-old boy, his brother and his mom, all of the kind of wounds that young men and women came home from Afghanistan with, or Iraq, or Korea. They signed up knowing it might happen. Cooper, Luke, and Keely Roberts, they just went to a parade. Friends of the family have set up a GoFundMe page to help cover medical expenses and therapy. You can see the address at the bottom of the screen tonight. Meantime, the gunman's father is speaking out, telling ABC News he has no regrets about helping his son in 2019 obtain the documentation needed to buy the weapons he did, despite his son's suicide attempt, threats to kill his family, and police confiscating 16 knives, a dagger, and a sword from him earlier that year.
I filled out the consent form to allow my son to go through the process. They do background checks, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The killer's father told ABC News he had no inkling his son would do this, says his threats against the family were taken out of context, and says he can't understand why his son did what he did. We're now from CNN's Ed Lavandera in Highland Park.
Selfish.
Could the gunman's father face any criminal charges for his role in signing documents that helped his son obtain weapons after he attempted suicide and threatened to kill the whole family?
Well, prosecutors, Anderson, have been telling us for the last few days that it's simply too early for that. But we got some more insight into how this could play out in the coming days and weeks. The state's attorney, Eric Reinhardt, told CNN earlier today that, as we've talked about, that the idea that this father sponsored his son's application for a permit to obtain a firearm here in Illinois, that action in and of itself, the state attorney says, is not a criminal offense. So that wouldn't be enough to file any kind of criminal charges. But the prosecutor does say that they're looking at much more than that and trying to figure out if there is any kind of evidence that could be turned up that would point to some sort of liability or some sort of culpability or involvement in this beyond what the father has been saying so far. But right now, Anderson, it appears that it's simply too early for prosecutors to have any kind of evidence.
And obviously, we've been talking about this 8-year-old boy, Cooper Roberts. What more are you learning about Cooper and his family tonight?
Well, it's simply devastating news. This 8-year-old boy, Cooper Roberts, remains in the hospital. We are told that he is on a ventilator and sedated. It has been so ever since he was taken to the hospital on Monday afternoon. But since we learned about his identity just a few days ago, I interviewed a gentleman who was here, a witness to the chaos when the shooting erupted. He was here visiting a family member. He's from Texas, and we showed him the picture of Cooper, and this gentleman that we spoke with actually administered CPR to the young boy there on the street just moments after he had been shot. His own son was missing in the chaos, and he passed off. A gentleman came up to him, tapped him on the shoulder, and said that he was a doctor, and the gentleman passed Cooper off to this other gentleman who was a doctor to help care for him. But looking back, and we can listen to some of the interview that we did recently with this man, and he was incredibly emotional, thinking about the look in the boy's eyes as he stood over them there on the ground.
He was non-responsive, so I just prayed over him, tried to help him the best I could. I tried to get some chest compressions on the boy, and then someone came over and told me they're a doctor, so I asked him if he could take over. I felt like he was more qualified, and my son was missing, and quite frankly, my mind was there. I was trying to focus. I couldn't focus. My own son's missing. That was kind of front line, top priority.
So Anderson, you really get a sense there, the emotion in his eyes and the chaos, the magnitude of this moment that so many people were dealing with, trying to figure out how to make the right
Gun
decision,
manufacturers
saving lives,
and
finding their own
Republicans
loved ones in those chaotic
are
moments.
bought.
That is the kind of frantic,
Nothing
frightening scene that these families
matters to them but power.
Luminary, thanks. That GoFundMe page for the Roberts family remains on the bottom of your screen. Thinking about that 8-year-old boy, now looking at photos of Katie Goldstein, one of the 7 murdered on Monday, drives home the cruelty that a holiday event so completely suited to families enjoying the moment together should be turned into the horror of parents seeing their children shot, or in Katie Goldstein's case, her daughter Cassie seeing her mom die. It's more than anyone should have to bear, but Katie Goldstein's story, the life she lived and how she died, Cooper Roberts' story and the life ahead for him, all we're learning about everyone touched by this. It's also a reminder not to become numb to it all, because the people of that parade were not simply the latest in a terrible trend. They were distinct individuals who led their lives, brought meaning to this world, and joy to the people around them. It's something I spoke about with Katie Goldstein's husband, Craig, shortly before airtime. Craig, thank you so much for being with us. As I told you before we began, I'm so sorry for your loss, for your daughter's loss. Your wife sounds just such an incredible person, and I wonder if we could just start by you telling us a little bit about her.
I could tell you what type of person she was. She was a generous and self-sacrificing friend, but she was never a doormat. She had an incredible sense of humor, but she was the quietest person in the room. She rarely had a bad word to say about anybody, but she wasn't naive. One of my friends said something about her which I have been thinking so much about for the last 2 days. He said something like, Katie was such a good person, and when you were in her presence, you became a better person. And I understand what he meant. She carried herself with such grace. When you were with her, you wanted to be your best self. And I think that's so true.
I heard a story that you met, I believe, in college, but it wasn't until 20 years later when you met again. And can you just tell me about the moment you met again? Because I understand something happened in that moment.
"20 years later, I realized that Katie was the one that got away. I called her in Milwaukee from Chicago. I thought we would be on the phone for 5 minutes. We were on the phone for an hour. It's like we were still best of friends. And when I hung up the phone, I thought to myself, I could fall in love with her. We met 2 weeks later for coffee, what could have been an hour. But we went next door to a bookstore. We sat on a sofa and we leafed through a book. And I thought to myself, I'm going to fall in love with her. And I'm going to marry her. And when we compared notes afterwards, I learned that at that same time, she was thinking the same thing. And I say this without exaggeration. From that first date, my life has been a fairy tale.
Wow. What a blessing.
Thank you. It was so true. It was so true.
And you raised 2 beautiful daughters together, and she, from what I understand, she loved nothing more than a night playing games with your daughters. I mean, she was all about your family, about you and your family.
Yes, you know, she, when we got married, she stopped working because we wanted to spend more time together. And when the girls were born, of course, she wanted to be home with the girls. Katie always had, she always had a smile on her face. She was always in the best of moods. And it's not because she was a simple person. It's because that's what was in her heart.
I heard that when your daughter, I think she was in a band or that had performances, and Katie went every night. There were 3 nights of performances, and she went every single night, which, you know, a lot of parents might go for one night, but she went for everyone, which is a lot. It's just, yeah, it gives me chills to hear you talk about her, because it really, gosh, I wish I met her, and I think a lot of people probably do who are listening right now tonight. Can you just talk a little bit about why you wanted to speak? Because so many people, I understand the desire to not have the person you have loved and the person who you love not just be a statistic or, you know, a picture that flashes across a TV screen. Can you just talk a little bit about what you hope comes out of you talking?
Katie was a private person. When I say that, she was very engaged in the world, but she did not seek attention. And I feel like in some ways it's a violation that I am talking about her. But I feel like it is important that people understand, that people view her as a full person. I want people to bear witness. I don't want people to be numb to events. I feel like I'm an ineffectual person, but the best I can do is perhaps paint a picture of Katie that will motivate someone to help with violence.
I'm not going to ask you to replay the events of that day, but I do just want to ask, because I understand your daughter was with Katie. Your daughter saw the gunman and told Katie, we have to run, and that they ran together, and they were together when Katie was shot, and that your daughter was able to say I love you to Katie. That in all the horror of this, and there's nothing that good that comes out of it, but in all the horror, that is at least a small blessing, I would imagine, to know that Katie heard that word love in that moment.
I can share with you what I understand happened. They heard a pop, pop, pop. Katie and other people thought they heard firecrackers. My daughter looked up at the roofs and she saw the gunman. She said, Mom, we have to run. And they were running, and Katie dropped to the ground. Cassie hid behind a garbage can, leaned out, and she said, Mom, I love you. And with that, Katie closed her eyes and she stopped breathing. And it's important for my daughter to think that Katie heard her. And my daughter imagined that when Katie heard that she was safe, it was then that she was at peace, saying, closed her eyes. I know it sounds like a fantastic story, but I'm telling you, if this could be true of anyone, it would be true of Katie. And then someone ran and snatched up my daughter Cassie, and they said, you have to run. And I was at home, I was able to find her a few hours later.
Well, Craig, thank you for sharing a little of Katie with us. And I know you said she was a private person, and but I appreciate you opening up the window and letting us see her incredible smile and learn about her, and also for reminding us to bear witness, because I think it's so important when it's so easy to just see something on television, on the news, and think you've heard it before, and it's another thing that's happened, and it just becomes part of the background noise, and that we can't allow that to happen. And I appreciate you adding your voice and making us bear witness
That
tonight.
is-
Thank you.
Yes, that is my worry. I don't want people to become numb. And thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to talk.
Craig Goldstein, thank you. Up next tonight, the Justice Department digging deeper into the former president's fake elector plot, see who is soon expected to hand over